Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Today I want to talk to you about MacroHard. Yeah, that's not Microsoft, it's MacroHard. And if you think MacroHard versus Microsoft is a certain kind of measuring contest, then you're probably on the right track. As I posted here yesterday, both of these things happened on the same day. You can see Tesla's AI team created a new, larger geofenced area that, as Josh West said, is an engorged geofence. And on the same day, xAI produced a companion called Annie, who is actually a threat to my wife. Misinformation was like, you're not going to use her. So instead I went with Rudy, and then I discovered, much to my great joy, that Rudy has a bad Rudy side to him. So you can actually get bad Rudy, and he's actually even more foul than Annie is. So it's rather funny to see a red panda acting as foul as he is. Definitely not safe for work, so just keep that in mind. But anyway, these two things happened in one day. So the idea that Elon Musk could create a gaming company or other company called MacroHard to compare with Microsoft, yes, that could definitely happen. In fact, it probably will happen. But within this post, there's actually some really interesting details, and that's what I want to focus on for the rest of this video. So first, let's take a look at the post that Elon was responding to or reposting. Danny Limanseda, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, said, "I took Grok 4 for a spin this weekend to build this game prototype. I used Super Grok Chat to generate the initial game prototype and then brought it over to Cursor to continue coding with Grok 4 Max." So basically, he used Grok 4 for this entire thing, and you can see that the gameplay is actually quite good. I mean, this is incredible that this thing just produced this game on its own. This is the kind of vibe coding that's absolutely out of control. And if this isn't interesting enough in its own right, I actually did vibe design this weekend, over the weekend and yesterday. I actually did design work with the same sort of vibe idea as vibe coding, and actually created a design and palette and a bunch of different web pages for a project I'm working on. I think that's really, really cool. So these AIs, and in particular Grok 4, are just doing amazing stuff. Anyway, I'm going to pause that because that's a lot of activity going on there. Anyway, Elon Musk reposted this and said, "We are creating a multi-agent AI software company, xAI, where Grok spawns hundreds of specialized coding and image video generation understanding agents all working together, and then emulates humans interacting with the software in virtual machines until the result is excellent. This is a macro challenge and a hard problem with stiff competition, ha ha ha. Can you guess the name of the company? Obviously, it's going to be MacroHard." And obviously that's a direct response to Bill Gates' company, Microsoft. And then just to finish reading these posts here, he responded to himself. "Ultimately, it's going to be input bitstream goes to feedback goes to output bitstream. Tesla already does the first two steps in the car and has also been able to generate real world videos for a few years. If you haven't seen my video on that, you can check it out up here. It was, well, I think it was 2 years ago at this point. Anyway, just need to widen the aperture for a far broader variety of bit IO patterns or input output patterns. Traditional coding will look like painting with brushes. It would be silly to automate painting with brushes using a robot hand, just render the pixels." And then one more quick follow-up that's really a tangent here, but a really interesting tangent. After talking to the xAI team late one night about this, I thought, damn, we're probably living in a sim right now. And Elon Musk has been talking about this for a while, the idea that our universe is a simulated universe. And the more powerful our AIs get, the more powerful our simulation capabilities get, the more it becomes kind of a reasonable idea that there could be a master user out there, something along the lines of like Tron, that's actually running our simulation internally, and we obviously just don't understand that because we're inside the simulation. So some sort of combination of Tron and the Matrix would be what they're talking about here, that we're living in a simulation and we need to wake up, or I don't know if we can wake up, but anyway, that the odds are that we're living in a simulation rather than in reality at this point. So interesting thought. That's a little outside the scope of this video, but I thought I'd throw that in there as it's part of his response chain. So let's go back to Elon's first post. We are creating a multi-agent software company. So this is interesting. Multi-agent, we have definitely heard about that, about agents that go out there. You spawn agents. You say like, hey, can you go book me a hotel and a flight for a trip that I'm taking? And that, by the way, is a real thing. I'm going to X Takeover next week. I hope I will see you there. But in the process of that, I had to book plane tickets. I had to get hotels. I still have to rent a car and things like that. It would be really useful to have agents that could go out there and do all of that work for me. It would save time and it would be lovely. So that's the idea of agents working for you as an individual. But the interesting twist on this is he says we're creating a multi-agent AI software company. A little bit unclear about that. Maybe what he means is that the company's goal is to create multiple agents. It could also be that the company itself becomes a multi-agent company. So it's a little unclear exactly what he's saying there, but it is an intriguing thing. Let me know in the comments what you think he means by that in particular, because I find that a little bit nebulous and a little hard to figure out. Of course, next up, he talks about exactly what they're going to do with Grok. It will spawn hundreds of specialized coding and image/video generation/understanding agents all working together. So first of all, hundreds of agents. If you use Grok 4 Heavy right now, it only spawns 4 agents at present. Maybe it will be designed to spawn more of those later on, but at this point it only does 4. And of course, most other companies are only spawning a few agents at a time as well. The idea that it would spawn hundreds of specialized coding and image video generation understanding agents at the same time is really intriguing, even down to how we users would interact with that. Are these agents just always out there and we request their services online? We're like, hey, I need this coding agent to help me right now. Or instead, are these agents sort of dormant until you bring them up and there's an orchestrator that says like, oh, this person's asking about coding questions. I'm going to turn on these 3 agents right now and assign them this job so that they'll go off and work on John's project. Either way, the idea of orchestrating hundreds of agents at the same time is a challenge in its own right. I actually have a provisional patent on the books about this very thing. If folks want to hear about that, let me know in the comments as well, and I can do a video on that patent. So let's focus down on the next part of the sentence. Elon Musk is nothing if not pithy. He combines a lot of information into a very small space. So first of all, coding, we all understand what coding is. That's writing code. But then we have image/video generation/understanding agents. So the idea here is to take in images or video or potentially live stream. For example, if you had an Optimus robot or something like that, or a humanoid robot that was taking in streaming video information, and I assume audio as well, even though he doesn't mention that, but obviously audio is a reasonable input and is part of video generally. But you take in this information, either an image or live video or pre-recorded video, and then you either understand that, you either make sense of the world that you're in right now, or you generate the future. And we're going to get to that when we talk about Tesla in just a minute. But what this means is that you're taking in reality and you're outputting a projection of reality. You're trying to interact with the world, which is what all of us humans do. That's what a biological neural network does. We take in information about the world, we try to understand that information, and then we project what we're going to do. If I look over here and I see this cup, I'm going to go and think about reaching out and grabbing the cup and picking it up, and then I do so, right? So that's a projection into the world about what I think I'm going to do, and then I go ahead and act on that. Now, you could act on that in terms of bit output, right? If you're on a screen, it could produce images like we're seeing with this game down here. But in a humanoid robot or something, or in a car robot, you're projecting out the reality of what this thing is going to be at the next step. So what do you do? Now, this may be going a little bit further than what Elon is talking about here, but I think it's all highly related. The idea is that you're taking in and understanding images, video, audio, all of that kind of stuff. And from that, you're either generating a bit stream like you are here with this game that Danny worked on, or you're projecting yourself into the real world and taking actions, and the bit stream becomes the angle of actuation of your finger joints, of your elbow joint, or the wheel angle or accelerator pedal or something like that of a car. So you're talking about understanding the world, and that was a big project for Grok 4, was to actually understand the world. Elon has talked about that previously, but then to project yourself into the world, to either do that through bits, project bits out into the world on a screen, or to project yourself into reality and actually move around in the real world. The next idea is also very important, the idea of working together. We're not talking about agents that just go off and do their own thing and then produce a result. We're talking about the agents, and Elon talked about this in the live stream of the Grok 4 release. If you haven't seen my video on that, definitely check it out up here. But the idea with Grok Heavy is that these agents go off and work on a problem by themselves, but then they come back and they all sort of discuss it, like a study session, I think was what Elon, the term that he used. They discuss the results. They're like, oh, this is the best result. We're going to go with that one. So it's not a democratic vote. It's not like, oh, it's 3-2. This is the right answer. If there's only 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 100 agents that produces the best answer, then they can talk about it and they can say like, oh, this is the direction to go. That's a great idea. And then, of course, we get the idea of emulating human beings interacting, which is what I was just talking about, this study session, where these agents get together and they talk about the problem. They're like, ooh, who's got the best solution to this, right? So they interact with software in virtual machines. So they're living in a virtual world and they're kind of Monte Carloing this. They're looking at different possible solutions and they're picking the best out of all those solutions, living in this virtual software machine until they get an excellent result. And then my assumption is that you produce that result. That's what you create for real. So this is a huge vision of the way that agents can work analogously to the way a company works, the way a lot of human beings work together. And this is a level of Sam Altman's artificial superintelligence, is the idea that you move from the smartest single human being to the smartest corporate human being. The idea that you get the best and brightest human engineers, designers, etc., into a company, and that company produces a product that is far greater than one individual. This is the exact vision we're talking about here with XAI, is that it's going to produce this software company, this virtual company with hundreds of agents that will work together, not competing with each other. They'll work together to produce the best output for any given task. That should allow them to work on much longer horizon tasks. It should eventually allow them to discover new science, new physics, new engineering, things like that haven't been done before. And of course, Elon next says it's a macro challenge and a hard problem, so clearly the company is going to be called MacroHard. And then let's finish up with Elon's reply to himself. Ultimately, it's just going to be input bitstream, feedback, output bitstream. What does that mean? The input bitstream is just whatever data comes in. It doesn't matter if it's vision, audio, images, inertial measurement unit information for a car or for a robot. Whatever that is, it's just data. It's just bits of information. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of agnostic to that. So it just takes in that information, then it loops through, right? Whether that's human agents or virtual agents, probably mostly virtual agents. They'll work on the problem, they'll give themselves feedback, they'll figure it out, and then they will output a bitstream. That bitstream could be audio data, it could be an image, it could be video, it could be actions in the real world, again, actuator positions for a robot or something, or even the propellant and oxidizer feed for a rocket ship that's got to have maximum efficiency to get into orbit using the smallest amount of propellant, right? It doesn't really matter what that output bitstream is. The input bitstream and the output bitstream is agnostic to that. It just takes that information in, assigns the appropriate agents to the problem using some sort of orchestrator or conductor, and then uses an internal feedback system to come up with the best answer under the time circumstances. Some things like driving a car, you need to have an answer very, very fast, and it doesn't have to be the perfect answer, just has to be good enough. Other ones, like trying to figure out the perfect propellant mix for going into space or the perfect rocket design or something, it could take weeks or months. It doesn't matter because it's very important to end up with the right answer. So you have different time horizons, you have different amounts of feedback and amount of time and amount of compute that can be devoted to that feedback. But after you get done with that, you have an output bit stream that's either actuator positions for a robot, bits of images or video or audio on a screen, or data output. It doesn't really matter. It's, again, agnostic to that. And that really sets up a paradigm that is very, very different than the current paradigm. The idea that data is data, it doesn't matter what it is. I call this the corollary to the bitter lesson. The bitter lesson is the more data you have, the better you can train your AI. It doesn't really even matter how good the architecture is. This is a corollary to that. Data is data. You can be agnostic to the data. It doesn't matter what it is. You can train something to understand all of that data. And in particular, if you want everything to be really good at it, you train individual agents to become really good at individual types of data. But the orchestrator or the conductor doesn't really have to care. All it has to do is go like, oh, I recognize the kind of bitstream we're talking about here, the input bitstream, and what the output bitstream needs to be, and I'm going to assign this group of agents to work on the problem. And then Elon goes on to say Tesla already does the first two steps in the car and has also been able to generate real world video for a few years. Like I said, I did a video on that, I think a couple of years ago at this point. It was around August of 2023. Just need to widen the aperture for a far broader variety of bit input-output patterns. So Tesla takes in video and audio soon as well. It then chunks on that kind of stuff, and then it outputs the angle of the steering wheel, the amount of accelerator pressure or brake pressure, all of that kind of stuff. And again, for Optimus, the angle of actuators and things for it to move through space. So it's taking in bits of reality, it's using this feedback system, figuring things out, and the output bit stream is the angle of different actuators and things that will operate in the real world. And of course, the really interesting thing about full self-driving is it can actually generate video, like what it thinks things are going to look like. It's like, hey, if you made a right turn here, what would the video look like as you made that right turn? It actually is able to project out, again, sort of a Monte Carlo idea of what the world will look like after an action is taken. And that's really crucial to the way us humans work, right? Again, if I go over here to pick up this cup, I don't think that it's going to fall through my hands or suddenly explode or something like that. I have expectations, so I have a vision in my mind about what it's going to look like when I reach over here and grab it and pick it up and do things. And that vision is either reconfirmed, which is fine, or new information happens. Let's say I pick it up and it's like squishy instead of hard. That would be new information. I'd be like, whoa, I need to put that into the data banks and chunk on that for a while and figure out why it looks like it's solid, but it's actually squishy. So that's the kind of thing that humans do all the time, and we do it very, very well. And that's why babies drop things off their high chair all the time. Very annoying for parents, but it's babies learning. It's like, oh, gravity works the same way every single time I drop something. And if you ever see a little baby, when you give them like a helium balloon or something, the first time they let it go and it goes up, their heads just go, right? Because they're just like, what the heck is that? I've never seen anything like that before. It doesn't operate the same way as everything else that I know about. So it's really cool to see how that new kind of information with a biological neural network changes the neural network's patterns and things. Same thing for these artificial silicon-based neural networks. It changes these patterns and you can learn from that. That type of information is valuable. Anyway, Elon says you just need to widen the aperture. In other words, he's talking about creating something that can take in more kinds of bits. And again, I think he's talking mostly about a game company here. So the idea is rather than operating in a real world output situation, you can output video and audio instead, and you can get this kind of game look and things. So that's the kind of thing he's talking about specifically. And then finally, we get to this idea of coding will be like painting with brushes. So instead of having to type, you actually think in broad strokes. You think more like a designer, which is why I can go back to the beginning of this video and talk about doing vibe design work. It's really interesting to do design work without having to worry about the specific tools. You're just like, I have an idea in my mind. I know what I want. I just don't have the tools at hand and I don't want to build them. I want you to build the tools to show me what's in my head. So that's the idea here. You render out the pixels, you get the feedback. The way it's going right now is I'm a human in the loop. I'm giving feedback to something that is a relatively simple large language model that doesn't have a lot of agentic properties. But eventually you could see me going like, hey, design this entire thing for me. I give it a quick spec and it sends out 12 agents to work on that problem. And they come back in half an hour or an hour or something with a completely designed website with multiple pages. All of that stuff I didn't have to define. These agents just did it themselves. And even better for a game or something like that, you don't even have to have code. You don't have to have HTML or C++ or anything. You just render the pixels straight to the screen because the agents understand the assignment. They know what's supposed to happen and they're able to execute on that. So in the end, the vision for MacroHard is quite the vision. It's a very, very bold ambition. If anybody can do it, Elon Musk can. If I were the other AI companies like OpenAI or Google or Meta, I would actually be rather concerned at this point because xAI has made gigantic strides in a very, very short amount of time, and they're taking a different path. Again, they've got a kind of Elon. They've got this idea of creating these companions. They've got this idea of creating this gigantic corporation of super intelligent agents. All of that stuff should strike fear into these other companies because it is a bold vision. And if xAI gets there first, then these other companies are going to fall by the wayside relatively quickly. Has that occurred yet? Absolutely not. We're not there yet. Grok 4 is kind of in line with the other frontier models, a little bit better in some areas, but also a little bit worse in other areas. But if Grok 5 follows on relatively quickly and it's another jump that's that big of a jump, then xAI could really take the lead and pretty drastically over these other companies. Alrighty, folks, that's what I've got. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments. While you're down there, if you don't mind liking the video, it really helps other people to find it. That's the way YouTube's AI works. And if you subscribe, it really helps with YouTube's AI. So thank you so much for doing that. Just takes a couple seconds to click the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.